Hi, this is Emily of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
This is Jordan Butler, host of Head Over Heels, here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Head Over Heels, where we talk about everything the Miss America organization. A new show comes out bi-monthly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Head Over Heels. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
A fisherman tried boxing, but he only threw hooks. Welcome to Completely Serious. We're into November, the month of turkeys and early Christmas shopping. Amazing, we are already in the final sixth of the year. What would that be, the last 17%? Something like that. Anyway, so glad to have you along with us on Completely Serious on Public House Media. This is the show, and I don't think we say it enough, where we have fun and talk sports. That's kind of our unofficial saying. We have fun and talk sports, laugh, we hopefully laugh some more, and then we laugh again. Because there's so many people not laughing and not having fun and talking sports out there, and it's just sad, because you know what? That's what the world needs, more people having fun and talking sports. And today on our show, we are going to have fun and talk sports with KCRG sports reporter and anchor and all-around talent, Mike O'Brien. Mike, we plug early and often on Completely Serious, so what's your Twitter handle so people, in case that they are listening to this podcast just to learn your Twitter handle, they can get it, look you up, and then move on with their day? What is it?
Sure. The Twitter handle I got is just M O'Brien TV, fairly simple. And then on Facebook, you can find me at just Mike O'Brien space KCRG. That's kind of the professional page where most of us have one, I guess, in the TV industry, like to post some stuff on there. And then M O'Brien TV, O'Brien spelled O-B-R-I-E-N, is where you can find me there.
Mike, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, especially since you are so incredibly busy right now with, 4 or 5 different sports and teams all playing at the same time. Yeah,
we're right here, Cedar Rapids, right next to Iowa City. I actually live closer to Iowa City, which is obviously where the university is. Hawkeye football, they're obviously, big program, big fan base. Heck, even Iowa State's having an incredible year. We don't get out to Ames too much. It's a little further away, but we'll still cover them. And first time they're ranked in, I believe, over 35 years or so. So They're making some noise. Got a big game this weekend. And then tonight we got high school football playoffs starting in Iowa. And unfortunately, like you said, we're getting late in the year. And I believe this is the first day of snow we're having here in the corridor of eastern Iowa. So it should be a cold one tonight. Not looking forward to that part. The game should be fun. But
sure.
Standing outside for a handful of hours doing that's not one of the perks of this job.
I wanted to ask you about the Cedar Rapids area, actually. That brings up my next question. What's the sports scene like? You've mentioned a couple college teams and high school teams. I think of Cedar Rapids, and I picture mountains and waves and rapidly moving water and beautiful outdoor scenery, much like the name Cedar Rapids might imply. But what is it really like out there in Cedar Rapids?
Yeah, well, I think if you would expand, when you think Cedar Rapids, I would say turn that and just think of Iowa. And then when you think of Iowa, what comes to mind? And to me, it's always been corn.
Yes.
And that's about it. Cedar Rapids, it's got it's got the Quaker Oats, so it's got that nice, oatmeal-ish kind of grainy smell to it in the downtown area. And then, the vicinity, 5-10 miles right around there outside that radius is corn for a long way. As most of our country is in the heartland like that. Iowa City's got somewhat kind of the same deal, just kind of a big campus area where the university is. Obviously, a massive stadium, Kinnick Stadium's an awesome atmosphere, a fun place to be for the games. The sports scene here, they have their... Obviously, they've got their high school sports. They've got some bigger class schools. They've got some smaller class schools. If you go a little bit out of town, they got some semi-pro stuff with the unaffiliated hockey team,
Sure.
And they got the Cedar Rapids Colonels, who's they're an affiliate with the Angels now. They've switched between the Angels and Twins, so you've seen guys like Mike Trout and I believe Byron Buxton may have played there for a year, so they got that. But the bread and butter here has always been Iowa Hawkeyes. Always in the fall, it's Hawkeye football, and even in the winter, it's Hawkeye football. This year, the basketball team might make some noise, but even when they do make some noise, the focus is a big football place here.
If a town smelled like oats where I'm at, I'd want breakfast all the time, and that'd be kind of an interesting environment to live in. When you were young, Mike O'Brien, growing up and making a name for yourself on the school playgrounds, who were some of the sports guys or gals that you followed on TV?
I was a big Mike Wilbon fan. I would go home. I think it would start at about 4:30. Pardon the interruption. And that's practically all I watched. As I've grown, I've become a really big Scott Van Pelt fan. I know I'm kind of sticking with ESPNers here. Those are the guys I really look up to. They're phenomenal writers. They're phenomenal broadcasters. A lot of them can do kind of a jack of all trades kind of characteristics and traits with all of them that they kind of do. And I think when you want to be successful in this industry, you have to stay open to doing a lot of different things, and you got to be good at a lot of different things. If you try and just focus on that one thing, you can be really good at that one thing, but you might have some doors closed on you that you never thought would open some up other opportunities that you may actually be very interested in. So growing up, I really liked Mike Wilbon. Now that the broadcast scenery has somewhat changed since I was, I guess, growing up that age, elementary. I think it's, as I'm sure you know, and as I'm sure listeners would know, it's become a different world. What airs and what doesn't air, what kind of content airs, and I think now it's become a lot more of a hot take kind of place, especially on television. So now I don't necessarily enjoy it as much as I used to, when it maybe was a little more analytical. But there's still a place for that, whether it be on the television outlet or a newspaper or Twitter outlet, whatever it is. There's always a place for quality stuff.
What is your favorite sport to cover? I would imagine the heart-pounding action of Friday Night Football is near impossible to beat, but maybe you like the action of basketball or the pureness of baseball and softball, or maybe there's a bustling curling community in Cedar Rapids. I'm not sure. What do you like to cover the most?
It's not my favorite sport for many reasons. But there's just, they say football is king. It gathers probably the most amount of people that any sport would be able to gather. Just that atmosphere. I mean, when you just think of the history of some of the programs before I was here, I was up in Fargo, North Dakota State. They're an FCS team, so they're not as big as a school like Iowa, but just the tradition of that program and the fan bases. And I think it comes down to that, because I think a lot of us, how we get into this industry is we start off being fans. So we have a lot of connection with how the fans think or how they react to things or what they want to know. And I think that's a big part of why people start to get into this. And football, I think, is the biggest one that just has that huge fan atmosphere, whether it be a game against, number 2 Ohio State like we got coming in a week, or whether it was a couple weeks ago against North Texas. That stadium's always rocking, and I find that to be similar to a lot of college football. Now, I will say this. I don't know. I've never really been on an NFL sideline, so I don't know if football would be the same answer if I was covering the NFL, because that's a whole different ball game. Different teams have different kind of loyalties to their fans, and vice versa. But I'd say for right now, heading up to Kinnick or Jack Trice and Ames or even the Fargo Dome, covering college football has been an absolute blast.
Absolutely. As a fan growing up, you probably had a lot of athletes you liked and admired. Now in the professional field, is there an athlete that you would like to ask a question, like one question to a particular athlete? If so, who would it be? If you had that one athlete sitting in front of you, or at a press conference, and you had a chance to ask them something, who would that athlete be, and what would you ask them?
So is this someone I have not talked to before?
It could be both, actually, if you talk to them, but either way.
Well, let's see. I'm trying to think. When I was in North Dakota, that was the year Carson Wentz was there. He had played about 5 games. He had then broken his wrist. So he kind of got excused from talking to the media when he was out, but there was always that massive publicity around him because he was always going to be one of those top quarterbacks taken. And at the beginning of the year, okay, maybe second, third round kind of guy. And then really at the end, when some of these other guys fell off, that's when we really started to think, okay, this guy's really got a possibility to be a first-round pick, perhaps even top 5, and then he, of course, went number 2. He's always a very genuine guy when I talk to him. And I've, on your other previous episodes, I've heard you kind of garner this point too. I just want to ask him if he likes the media at all, because he's such a genuine guy that I feel like he might give an honest answer. And whenever he's doing our press conferences, whether it be one-on-one or a big room full of 100 people, he always just seems like a down-to-earth guy. But then you always feel like that's a face people put on for the media. And there's just, these guys get asked a lot of questions that I don't know if I would want to answer, especially in the scenarios that they have to answer these. It's a tough job for us. It's a tough job for them.
Yeah.
You see what happens with guys like, Cam Newton. Some days, you really got to hit him on a good day. Otherwise, he's either going to insult you or just walk out, and then that's your story, is him walking out instead of actually getting to talk to him. So I think the question I'd like to ask a lot of athletes, not maybe just Carson Wentz, is do you like actually talking to us? Because I think you get a mixed response. I think some people like it and some people don't, depending on what their background with the media is.
And there's so much pressure, and you brought it up earlier today, where there's 5 different social media accounts that each kind of capture a different aspect of a response. I mean, Twitter, it's all print, it's all in words, but then you have something like an Instagram where somebody can quickly share a video clip, or the same with Facebook. And it's just, there's so many different eyeballs on you in different forms. It's tough to think about all that as an athlete as you're answering what could be a challenging question. So it's definitely different.
Now that it's so rapidly out there, whether it's print or Twitter, or even pictures on Twitter, and then you get into the whole conversation with, there's a lot of bad people on Twitter who just like to stir the pot and start a lot of things. Trolls, I believe they're called.
Yes.
And they can really get to people, especially these athletes. It's not like these athletes just, some pay it no attention and some say they don't pay attention to it, but then they do. There's a really revealing piece about, I think it was Richard Dye, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was on Eddie Lacy and, his shaming on his weight and stuff like that. A guy you would never think that even thinks twice about what the fans say, but then you see how much it actually personally affects him and the way he goes about his life just from, just these guys attacking him on Twitter. So these players have to be careful whether they want to actually open themselves up to the world. And, that's why we're here. We're supposed to bring the athletes closer to reality and closer to the fans and have that connection. But that connection can sometimes be dangerous in nowadays when it's not just a 15-second TV clip. Now we're trying to get to them 24 hours a day, whether it be on Twitter or TV, anything. And it can be dangerous for some of these players who then don't want to open up or really share anything. So then you get these cliche answers of whatever, just sticking to the fundamentals and execution, and then you don't actually get to have a real conversation with them, which is where this industry started.
Mike, I want to play one game with you before we head out, and it's one of our tougher games, actually. I thought you'd be up for the challenge here.
Yeah, sure.
We just call it onomatopoeia. It's pretty basic. I'm going to ask you to describe the NFL season, which is about halfway over now, and I think by the time this airs, it will be halfway over. It's been crazy. Just different teams rising up. There's been a lot of outside stories too. I want you to describe the NFL season in 3 different sounds, onomatopoeias. I'll give you some examples. I'll give you some examples and give you some time to think about yours. It's a challenge, but here's what I got. My first one would be, a disgruntled grunt, because the national anthem story, which certainly has an importance and is valuable, but it's been discussed so frequently by different people and in different ways. Every time I hear it, I just want to go, I just want the discussion to move forward. My second onomatopoeia would be whoa, because there's been so many surprising things I feel like that have happened this year. Teams that we wouldn't expect to be great have been great, and it's just been a year that has kind of shocked a lot of people. So I think whoa might be a good word, a good onomatopoeia. And then finally, my last one would be yep, because I feel like there's been a lot of players this year, and maybe teams, say the Los Angeles Rams or even Philadelphia with Carson Wentz, that you knew were going to be good and had talent, but now you're like, yep, because you knew it and you're seeing it, so it's maybe not as surprising that as to you as maybe to many other people. But when either three maybe onomatopoeias that you might be able to use to describe the NFL this season.
Sure. Well, my first one, God, I probably won't be good at doing the sound effect, but I just want to start crying about the injuries that have happened this year. I get football's the sport that this happens probably most frequently to, but and I don't know whether if it actually is an outlier or not, but just the amount of superstars that have gone down. J.J. Watt I think he was there partially last year, but practically missing his second full season in a row when you have, a first ballot defensive Hall of Famer already on a top defense. And like you said, they're one of the teams that are doing well, but can you imagine how much better they'd be doing if they're missing their best player?
Oh, they'd be
incredible.
Incredible.
They're still doing well.
Yeah.
Obviously quarterback's most important position in all sports, but man, I miss seeing him on the field. And then, I'm a Packer fan, so when Aaron Rodgers went down, I did cry a little bit inside. It's just, you see these players who do some things that just have not been done on a gridiron before, and then it's gone just like that. And then, it ruins all your Sundays for the rest of the year. So the first one would be crying a little bit inside. The second one kind of echoes what I would just do a big sigh on the inconsistency that the NFL shows when it comes to this anthem kind of thing. And I think the inconsistency comes from really butting heads with, and I don't know the percentage, but I think these owners are really butting heads on how to handle this, and kind of Commissioner Roger Goodell is kind of stuck in a tight spot on which direction to go. Do you follow the NBA and become more progressive, which is what it seems like they're trying to do, inviting these players for meetings and having talks with them, and then you see some of these owners saying that, I literally, own these players. They have to do as I say, otherwise they don't play. When you talk about, the Jerry Joneses of the world who will say something echoing that, saying you don't play. And I don't necessarily believe that. I think if, say, Dez Bryant took a knee, I have a hard time believing that he would call down to Jason Garrett and say Dez Bryant doesn't play. Same thing with Ezekiel Elliott. I think that it's a threat. I don't know if there's much behind that threat, but that gives me a big ugh over their lack of transparency in actually dealing with this.
Very fair. I think that's a good one, too. I agree with that.
Yeah, and then the second one, I guess, would be it would be a little different. It'd be like because I think now, it's a fun game. You see these players now for the first time, and again, I don't want to completely go to this point because I think it takes away from the sport, but this whole thing that started with Colin Kaepernick now has really, I think, bonded a lot of players together that are actually using their power as players and the pedestal that they have to actually do something about it and to actually speak up. I mean, I don't know all of the facts behind this, but I don't remember the last time there was an NFL player like Doug Baldwin who actually goes on to major media outlets like CNN or like whatever else he's been on and actually starts talking about social injustice issues. I don't remember a time where sports was that intertwined with real world politics. And I don't like, the whole stick to sports thing. I think they're always intertwined. I think if you don't want to intertwine, then you're just ignoring the athletes as their personal lives. But I find it interesting now that a lot of these players are truly standing up for what they believe. I think in the NFL for a first time in a very long time that they have been able to give that voice this high of a platform. Whether people agree or disagree with how they're doing it, I guess that's a different story. But the fact that they're just doing something and not ignoring it and just say, oh, we're only focused on football, I find that admirable.
Mike O'Brien, thanks a ton for jumping on Completely Serious. Remind everybody one more time where they can find you both on TV and online.
Yeah, Facebook, you can go ahead and take a like on my Facebook page. My boss would like that. On Mike O'Brien, space KCRG, O'Brien spelled O-B-R-I-E-N. And then on Twitter, you can find me at MOBrienTV. Simple as that.
Mike, Really appreciate it. Thanks a ton. Keep doing great work in Cedar Rapids.
I appreciate it, Ryan. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Mike. That was Mike O'Brien on Completely Serious on Public House Media. We'll see you next week.